As you probably all know, March is Women's History Month, and tonight's program would not be possible without the help and support of the American Association of University Women. On behalf of the Livermore Public Library, I would like to thank AAUW for partnering with us for this program. Now, I would like to introduce Wendy Ping from AAUW to say a few words and introduce our very honored speaker this evening.
Thank you, Paul. I'm pleased to welcome you all here tonight and the Livermore, Pleasanton, Dublin branch of the American Association of University Women would also like to thank the Livermore Public Library for their sponsorship of this event tonight. I see a lot of familiar faces and fellow AUW members, but I see a number of other faces as well. So if you're not familiar with the American Association of University Women, we are an organization that advances equity for women and girls through advocacy, education, philanthropy, and research. Those aren't my words, but they do describe it quite accurately. Our local branch is very active. We sponsor a number of college scholarships each year. We also send about 8 girls each year to Tech Trek, Math, Science and Math Camp, which is held at Stanford University each summer. And that is a full scholarship that is afforded to those young ladies. We're also very active in analyzing new and pending legislation at the state level through our Public Policy Committee. And we host programs on a monthly basis in areas of interest to the AUW mission. We also have a variety of interest groups. If you'd like to learn more about AUW or are interested in membership, please see Sandy, who is waving at you right now from the back. She's set up there at the table, and we'll have information and be happy to chat with you after our program. Our speaker tonight is Carol Kinnard. Carol is a computer science teacher at Granada High, where Carol has been teaching with the Livermore Public School System for about the past 11 years. Carol received her Bachelor of Science degree in computer engineering from the University of Illinois at Urbana. And then she proceeded to work for about 10 years as a computer engineer in engineering, working for companies like Sun Microsystems in positions that literally took her all over the world. So you can see that Carol brings a very interesting blend of experience and knowledge of the real world to these students who are so lucky to have her as a teacher currently. When Carol first joined Granada High, there was one course in computer science. Today, there are 12. That initial course was an intro to computer science, not surprisingly. Today, courses range from that intro class to courses in mobile computing, in game design, and college level classes. Carol is a master teacher for Project Lead Your Way, the nation's leading provider of engineering curriculum. She was honored at the White House late last year as one of 100 teachers making a difference in the field of computer science. She's technical leader for Google Education at Granada. She's on the Livermore District Technology team, and she was named Sandia National Laboratory 2014 STEM Teacher of the Year. I am most delighted to present this evening's speaker to you, Carol Kinnard.
Raise it up. Always been tall. Hi, everyone. Thank you for that wonderful welcome. Thank you all for coming tonight and hearing me stand on my soapbox. Those who know me might not hear a whole lot new because I've said some of this before. But I want to share with you my experience about being a woman in a technology field. When I was a child, I kind of knew I was different from the get-go. I was a tomboy, but a lot of girls are tomboys. I loved English, loved reading, loved grammar, loved writing, the whole aspect of English I loved. I could lose myself in books for days. But I also loved math. I loved puzzle games, solving riddles. Geometric proofs were my favorite topic of all. And I see some faces like this. I know, it's a little unusual. In addition to that, I was clueless about the games girls played, the craft that they dealt out to each other like a bridge game. I couldn't understand it. So this all made sort of a nerd, a geek, as we call it these days. And I was happily a geek. I had geeky friends. I went to a geeky college, the University of Illinois, and graduated in computer science. From there, I worked, as Wendy said, for a variety of companies. One of them was Lockheed Missiles and Space, Sun Microsystems, did some independent contracting for a good friend of mine, did a startup, 20-person startup, and got introduced to the web and Java and the technology boom that we're seeing today. And then I decided to try my hand at teaching. And I've been doing that, like Wendy said, at the Livermore School District for a number of years. And over the course of all of this computer science education and training and work and teaching, I've come to realize a couple of things. That it doesn't take a geek to be a computer scientist. It's a very creative field, very creative. And number two, not many people know that it's a creative field. So I want to tell you with my English skills about some creative and intelligent people from the past. The first was Ada Lovelace. Or wait, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself because I want to get your attention with some numbers first. See, this math and English thing, it just competes all the time. So I'm going to start with some math. By the year 2020, that's in a short 5 years, 50% of the jobs in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, will involve computational science of some sort. 400,000 graduates will come out of our university systems, but we will need 1.4 million computer scientists in 5 years. Worse, of those graduates, 17% are women. When you crank all the numbers out, that means that in the field there will be 5% women, 1 in 20. For a field that's arguably going to be the most influential field for the next couple of decades, we represent 1 in 20. As women, our ideas, our passions, our contributions will all be absent. We're not coming to the game. And it's really strange that we're not coming to the game because we invented the field. That's worth repeating. We invented the field. So here's my storytelling, and Ada Lovelace. She was the daughter of Lord Byron, Lord Byron, the poet, and she was born in 1815, a time when girls were not encouraged to pursue scientific explorations. But her mother, Lady Byron, forced her to learn mathematics. It was an easy sell. By the age of 13, Ada had invented her own flying machine. Her father, Lord Byron, called her, I love this, his princess of parallelograms. At 17, keep these numbers in your brain. At 17, she met Charles Babbage, who had invented this machine called the difference machine, or the algebraic machine, and it was a computational machine. It was so advanced that its full realization could not be invented in its day, but it was worth exploring and trying to promote this algebraic thinking machine. So she worked with Babbage for a number of years, balancing her career with marriage and motherhood. Sounds familiar. And in 1843, Babbage asked her to explain this algebraic machine to a colleague of theirs, an Italian engineer. And I want to get this right, so I'm going to read this. She included the first published description of a stepwise sequence of operations for solving certain mathematical problems. Rephrased, she wrote a programming language, the first ever published in the world. Furthermore, she saw the true potential beyond pure algebraic computation and imagined a general-purpose computer. One of the examples that she described had to do with music, and she wrote, supposing, for instance, that the fundamental relations of pitched sounds in the science of harmony and of musical composition were susceptible of such expressions and adaptations, the engine might compose elaborate and scientific pieces of music of any degree or complexity or extent. In 1843, Ada predicted GarageBand, a full 161 years before Apple released it. So, Ada realized that this machine could interpret instructions, manipulate symbols in accordance with rules. The symbols could represent entities other than numerical calculations. She envisioned the general purpose computer. The Navy created one in 1938. She envisioned it in 1843. Alan Turing, anyone see the imitation game?
Yeah.
Alan Turing created his code cracking machine in 1936, but it was not a general purpose computer. And Alan Turing is the father of computer science, according to many people. Ada is not considered the mother, but she is considered the first programmer. People have credited her with that. In fact, her legacy does endure. The first language that was truly written for a general purpose computer in an engineering capacity was Ada, where we got a short-lived B language, which led to the C language, which led to C++, which led to Java. There might be some nodding heads. We know these languages. They persist today, and they run most of our engineering applications. So, science. But it wouldn't have gotten very far, even with the general purpose computer. That the ENIAC, I don't know if you've heard of that, but that was the first general purpose computer. Wouldn't have gotten as far as it has today without another mother of invention. Grace Murray Hopper. She was born in 1926. Story a little different than Ada, different times, different pursuits. She graduated Vassar in 1928 with a BA in math and physics. Went on to earn her MA and PhD from Yale. She was married, but widowed because of World War II, and then joined the Navy. So when she joined the Navy, she ended up working in a computer division, and she saw her first computer. And just like her alarm clock, she took it apart. She had taken her alarm clock apart when she was a child, put it back together, figured out how it ran. Did this to the computer, and started to program it. She wrote award-winning programs, did wonderful things with these applications, and other people had done this as well. She wasn't the only one to write these programs. Mathematicians would crank these programs out and make these computers work. But she had a vision. What sets her apart is that she saw this language as being prohibited. Because the applications required complex numerical systems, they could only be written by mathematicians. Grace's idea was to take these instructions and make them more English-based, to make a programming language for non-mathematicians. It required a conversion from the easier language into the instructional machine language that the computers needed. She wrote the very first compiler. A compiler also meant that the program could be stored on magnetic tape instead of typed in every time you wanted to use it. Imagine typing something in every time you wanted to use it. The entire language set. You're not a geek, it's sort of hard to imagine, but it'd take you days and days. There are millions and millions of lines of code. So, she even recommended that an entire programming language could be made out of this kind of language structure, and was immediately told that she couldn't do this because computers don't understand English. 3 years later, she published her first compiler in 1952. Her language and compiler was the predecessor of the COBOL programming language, which today has 80% of businesses running COBOL, and over 200 million lines of code are written in Grace's language. She became a rear admiral in the Navy, saw great success as a public speaker, and even has a national day named after her, Grace Hopper Day, October 8th. Today, every computer, your iPhone, the computer in your car, Angry Birds, your texting, all exist because of a compiler. Every language and every program uses it. When asked what her greatest accomplishment was, and I want to get this right, all of the people I've trained. It wasn't even the compiler. So, the first language was written by a woman. The first compiler to interpret this was written by a woman. We were pioneers in this field, discovering, inventing, creating. During the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the rise of CS engineers was pretty much equal. Women and men went into the field equally. But then, in the mid-1980s, something changed. Women started dropping out. The field began to be dominated by men, which is how we got to 17% and 1 in 20. But what happened? Well, Arguably, it's all the fault of a marketing plan. You see, Steve Jobs and his Apple computer were hot in the 70s. They were exciting. They were starting to take off. And IBM, the big monolithic IBM, ran most of the government and business computers in the world. They owned almost all of the hardware and all of the software. They realized that this young upstart could take something away from their industry, so they invented this thing called the PC. Bill Gates sold them his dirty operating system, I mean disk operating system, not a Windows fan, and the rest is history. The PC took off. But at the time, they didn't know what to do with it. They needed a marketing plan. They had no idea what to do with this PC. So one scientist even predicted that the only application they could ever see for a personal computer in someone's home was to use as a database for a cook's recipes. Remember, there was no network. There was nothing. There was just this monolithic computer running the government and this little PC. How were they even related? IBM could not see it. So they invented, basically, a new market, PC gaming. Well, sounds great. What kind of games to make? That's the next question. We're going to make games for this thing to sell our new invention. Let's make some games. Well, who's going to buy the PC? Looks like a tool. It's definitely hardware. So the market analyst said boys will buy this tool. So let's make games that boys will play. And here's the rub. It's not just any boys. It was boys from families whose parents could afford an expensive toy. Welcome to the middle to upper class white-dominated boys club. And this is not their fault. I do not blame them at all. I love working with boys. I was a tomboy. I hung out with both of my brothers. House full of engineers. I adore it. But we are disservicing our girls and our underrepresented minorities, by the way. They feel just as excluded because of this boys club. So, I said arguably. There is some debate whether this was the direct result, but I think it fits. The timing is an amazing coincidence that in the mid-1980s, when this marketing spiel happened, we saw the drop-off in girls and underrepresented minorities. So, the trend continued for many, many years. It's continuing today for a large part. But in around 2008, it started to set off alarm bells in industry. You see, that's about the time when technology became everywhere. It became ubiquitous. It became everywhere. It touched our lives. Seemingly overnight, it was in our clothes, in our glasses, in our toasters, and our alarm clocks. Technology, we can't get away from it. And industry saw that we only have 30% of the engineers that we need to function. In steps a UCLA professor named Jane Margolis, sociologist that was told of this phenomena by a friend and said, I know nothing about computers, but the friend said, you will be fascinated by what's happening in education. Go research it, and she did. Wrote a book about it. Not only did she research it, by the way, she fixed it. She recommended a solution for it that we're working with today. The book is called Stuck in the Shallow End. I recommend reading it. It's an enjoyable read. And she discussed this boys club problem, and I'll relate one of the stories to you from this book. Patricia Ordonez didn't have a computer at home, but she was a math whiz at school. She quotes, my teacher realized I was really good at solving problems, so she pulled me and this other boy out to do special math, she says. We didn't have to go to recess, we got to do math. So when Ordonez got to Johns Hopkins University in the late 1980s, she figured she would study computer science or electrical engineering. Then she took her first intro course and found that most of her male classmates were already way ahead of her because they had played with computers at home. She quotes, I remember this one time I asked a question and the professor stopped and looked at me and said, you should already know this. She thought, I am never going to excel. If Patricia had attended college in the 1970s, this never would have happened. Professors did not assume that you already had experience, but that had changed by the late 1980s. Ordonez got through the class, but earned her first C in her life. She eventually dropped the program and studied foreign language. I think Patricia's story is an educational tragedy. It plays out in schools all around the country, where an all too common story from our kids goes like this. When I walk into a computer lab, this is from another young woman, When I walk into the computer lab at school, I know I don't belong. Nobody looks like me. Everybody's talking a different language, and they're doing things I have never seen. I couldn't do what they do in a million years. Even in my class, I'm ashamed to say, a Granada High School cheerleader walked in to join our gaming club. And I was shocked to learn later that a boy said, "What are you doing here?" I mean, you'd think they'd want to invite girls. I don't get it. But this boys club is starting to change. Thanks in part to Patricia Margolis and her research, a host of organizations such as the Los Angeles School District, the National Science Foundation, the College Board, various universities, high-tech companies, all are collaborating to implement a new curriculum designed to appeal to a wide range of students, including girls, underrepresented minorities, and students with no prior experience. And it's working. A few years back, Stanford University redesigned its first computers course, and in the span of a few years, saw women's participation climb from 15% to 35%. I've seen this growth at my school, started at about 10%, and I'm up to about 35% girls. We've got a long way to go, but we are making progress. So the CS curriculum is moving away from this highly syntactic, detail-oriented programming course to more creative and conceptual courses, exploring thought processes and how to apply algorithmic thinking to issues students see throughout their days and in their communities. You might ask, how's it done? Well, I'm glad you asked. I actually have an activity for you to do. Sandy's going to hand out some papers. If you need a pen, it represents one of computer science's most enigmatic problems. It's called the minimal spanning tree, very fancy term for Mud City. It's also known as the traveling salesman problem. Think about how to get a salesman or woman around, let's say, 20 cities across the country. What's the most efficient way? Time, distance, cost. How do you span 20 cities the most efficiently? It's a very difficult problem. In fact, the algorithm was first created in 1926 by a Czech scientist trying to provide electricity to his hometown. The performance of this algorithm is based on logarithmic calculations and can be greatly improved with parallel and distributing computing. It has extensions in mathematics and combinatorics. It is a solution that has no solution. This is a problem that no one has been able to prove that you can find a minimal spanning tree solution. It is still unproven to this day. But second graders can try. And with a simplified problem such as Mud City, who knows, maybe a second grader will work on this and she'll be the one to grow up to solve this computer science enigma. So, I believe we have a national imperative to encourage our young girls and young women to explore the fields of computer science. And we need to start young. I like to use the analogy. In elementary school, you don't start teaching Homer's Odyssey. You start teaching the Cat in the Hat. You don't have to learn computer science with intimidating computational languages, but with Scratch Kitty and with Storytelling Alice. And if you don't know what those are, they're Googleable. I like Mark Zuckerberg's quote. In 15 years, we are going to be teaching programming like we teach reading and wondering why we didn't do it sooner, as in second grade, first grade, kindergarten. Studies have shown that girls, and boys for that matter, self-evaluate what they can and cannot do, what they like and what they don't like. They self-evaluate by middle school. A girl who loves math and excels in it as a fourth grader more often than not starts falling behind in middle school and is significantly underperforming in high school. A girl interested in computer science but discouraged because the club doesn't look or talk like her will most likely never participate, ever. So, in fits and starts, schools around the country are beginning to include engineering and computational theory in elementary schools. As intimidating as that sounds, it is not overwhelming. Take, for example, this project I saw at a Livermore grammar school recently. They are implementing Project Lead the Way's launch curriculum to bringing engineering curriculum down into the elementary schools. It's a lot of work, and the dedicated teachers have a lot to learn in order to teach it, but they learn with their students. So the application that I saw in this classroom had a parabolic, a U-shaped set of poster boards set up in the middle of the classroom, and all the children were gathered around it. And she took a simple Lego car and started it at the top of the parabola, the U shape, started it at the top of the parabola and let it go. And all the kids watched as the car went back and forth until it finally came to rest at the bottom of the U. The kids were amazed, and they immediately started doing mathematical computations, and these are fourth graders doing this. You can modify the track, you can vary the weight of the car or the starting point, calculate the rate of change. An immense amount of learning can come from this simple demonstration. These students in middle and high school, they're going to see these concepts. When they go into further grades, they are going to have this foundational knowledge. Trigonometry, geometry, all of these concepts can be demonstrated at a very young age, and the students don't even need to know it's called trigonometry. Studies have shown that when students have foundational knowledge on a topic, learning happens much faster and much deeper because that knowledge has something to glob onto. When that knowledge is physical, it's even a deeper set of learning. So, new curriculum such as this is changing students' views of computer science and engineering. Programs are beginning in elementary schools where students can create stories with a programming language like Alice. They can tell Scratch Kitty to have an adventure or play jump rope. They're using their creativity as foundations for learning. In middle school, kids can program their mobile devices to play guessing games, create adventure games, or share stories and make imaginary celebrity dates. Again, using a more creative approach to inspire themselves. In high school, students can deepen their knowledge, use professional grade programming languages, and learn the software development process, all while creating projects that are based on helping people and solving social issues. Projects that are open-ended, highly collaborative, and socially engaging. But there are still hurdles to overcome. The schools that can afford these engineering programs and this type of curriculum are often based in wealthier, homogeneous neighborhoods. Students with computers at home still have an advantage to children who do not. Students whose families can afford expensive camps will have an advantage over children's families who do not. Girls and women still feel excluded at some of the time. So, for our country to continue as a great innovator of technology and as a leader in this brave new information age, we need to reach every girl and teach them to not just be users of technology, but to be creators and inventors of it. It's, after all, what we do. Any questions? Thank you. Yeah.
Carol, when you when you went back to Washington and were honored, how many of the people that you were honored were women?
A minority. But some of the organizations that sent us, the question was, in Washington, D.C., where the 100 teachers were gathered together, how many of them were women? And it was mostly men. But I would say more in the range of the 30 to 35%, and not the 10% that I've seen. When I go and get trained for my engineering program, I'm down in the 10%. I am one of the few women in the field. Now that is starting to change. We're starting to see a similar trend because schools, parents, administrations, districts are starting to demand computer science teachers. So some brave women are stepping up and going, okay, I'll learn it. It's a scary thing to do. Nobody's had this experience, really, in teaching.
How many were in the computer science, or were they all computer science teachers?
They were all computer science teachers, right. And they were at all levels. They weren't just high school. They were middle school and high school. So, yeah.
Have you noticed while teaching computer-focused programs at school that there's any lesser involvement on the younger generation learning, like long division, multiplication tables, things like that, that they can easily get answers to on their calculators or computers or iPhones or whatever?
In terms of computation, mathematical computation, I don't see a big difference. But what I do see is a student not willing to think. they'll be sitting there and I'll say, so what do you think the word computation means? The process by which a computer can process information. No, I can Google. I thank you. I want to know what you think. And they're not comfortable doing that because information is so handy. If there is something they're asked that they don't know, they want to look it up. And I can't decide if that's necessarily a bad thing or I don't think it's a lazy thing. I think they want to know that information and they know where to get it. And that's a good thing. But they hesitate to use their own reflective experience to get there. I do think that's a bit of a disadvantage. But no, I don't see it in terms of mathematics. I still see students struggle who can't figure out that half of a half is a fourth, but I don't think that's a laziness because of calculators and tools being around. I think some people just struggle with fractions. You know.
My daughter is a college freshman majoring in computer science. And
Yay!
And she's at a school that they have 22% women, and they're very proud of it. They've been working really hard.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just dropped her off at the airport back from spring break on Saturday. And on the way to the airport, she said, there's something wrong with what we're doing here. And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, math and comp sci are creative endeavors. And I said, okay. And she said, a lot of the girls that she's seeing are dropping out as freshmen. They're not able to handle the material. She said, my poor roommate is up working problem after problem. She's not getting it. She's a history person. She shouldn't be doing it. But she said, it's a creative thing, and you have to, she said, I would go so far as to put computer science in with the College of Art. That's how far I would go with it. She said, I think we've bucketed people. So anyway, she's all excited about looking into this, and I just wondered if you had any advice for her about, she wants to research this. She's on to something, and she wants to talk to the dean there, who's also a female, luckily. But what would you encourage her to do into looking into the broader picture, not just her own education, but the broader picture about getting the girls interested and channeled in the right way, using this sort of creative notion about.
It's a tough concept. The pipeline, as we like to say in the industry, the pipeline is very big because we need 22-year-olds coming out of college with a computer science degree, but they need to be inspired before 5th grade. That's a long time to wait, and we can't afford to wait that amount of time to get our 5th graders to save us from, ourselves. A lot of the girls that I've talked to have decided to do computer science as a minor, and I think that's a very convenient way to be with the times, to be enabled to be a programmer, if that is indeed what you want, to be a full-fledged engineer. If you minor in it along with fashion, I don't know if you've seen the programmable clothing. They have programmable fingernail polish now. Through RFID, you can program your fingernail polish to automatically change to match your outfit. I mean, they're just doing phenomenal things. I know, it sounds unreal. So, if her passion is A, and she likes computer science B, then major in A and minor in B. The problem is that we still have a bunch of old school teachers who teach this syntactic. I was teaching loan mortgages, according to this book that I had. I should have told my students how to do a mortgage calculation. All right, all 12-year-olds in the room, who wants to do loan mortgage? All 25-year-olds, 40, I don't want to do mortgage loans. I want to make the kitties dance across the stage and, jump rope. So the algorithms that we're trying to force down these kids' throats needs to change. And it sounds like the school is in the right direction, but some of their curriculum still needs to improve. There are ways to get around the problem solving, just problem after problem after problem, and get more creative. So minoring in it, talking to the dean is a good idea. I don't know, it's a tough problem to get because you're talking about changing the curriculum at the university level, and that's no easy thing.
Do you think that part of the problem is that maybe the colleges need to come into the 21st century and maybe move computer science out of being a BS and maybe being more of a BA.
Right,
Because that's
as the daughter, yeah, your daughter
what's
said, yeah,
happening
to be a
is that
BA,
they're
right.
forcing them into doing hard math, where, in my experience, software is not hard math.
Right.
It's more
Well,
hard.
and the trick is that you heard where it started. Mathematicians invented the ENIAC to do mathematical calculations. Now, shouldn't all computer scientists do something like the ENIAC? And no, we're very far away from that first computer. But our history is embedded in it, and it's hard to break that history. Some of the most successful universities have taken a more embedded approach to this problem. They are stopping this. We are the computer science school, we are the engineering school, we are the math school, we are the art school. And they're starting to do a much more blended type of teaching, where the art student will take computer science and the engineer will look at Steve Jobs. We all know the brilliance of his art combined with his technology. So some schools are getting along in that area. Education is painfully slow to change, and it's hard to find the teachers, even at the university level. So it's just a tough nut to crack. So we got to keep plugging away at it. I saw another, yeah.
Is there any scientific evidence that the genetic differences between women and men make any difference in what subjects they are good or bad at?
The genetic data shows that girls are better at math at a young age. They excel. In fourth, the nation takes, the whole nation takes a national test at fourth grade, and girls continuously, for the past 20 years, have scored not a whole lot higher. I think 7, 8, maybe 10% higher than boys. The problem is that in junior high, they don't want to be smarter than the boys. And an entirely peer-driven, I don't know what, goes into effect that changes how the girls are going to behave. And it becomes not a genetic thing after the age of fourth or fifth grade, it becomes a social thing. And that's where they seriously fall off.
Thank you.
So, behind you, Wendy.
Could you just repeat what you said earlier, because I found it surprising about, you said the ratio of men and women in computer science was actually higher before 1980? Is that, and it dips
Correct.
down? Is that?
Oh, significantly. It was and I didn't bring any graphs. I'm not a big PowerPoint person, but from the 1950s, when the industry basically was invented for all means and purposes, when we had these computers that needed to be programmed outside of the Navy and our warfighting machine, when these computers first came into existence, men and women, the scale goes like this. They just chug right along. There were more men in industry because there were more men in industry. Women were still working at home and things like that. But the rate at which men and women entered the field was the same for 30 years. And then in the 80s, boom, women fell off and it just stopped entering the field, yeah. And people are still, I was a little tongue-in-cheek with the marketing plan. Not everybody agrees with that. It's the best explanation I've heard in the last decade as to why this happened when it did, was that the PC became this boys' toy. Sorry guys, no disrespect.
So how can we as parents and grandparents actively support our girls?
Get the word out. There's no better way to get this going than from a grassroots movement. Learn yourself. Play on code.org. I gave a talk to evening educational session to a bunch of 7th grade girls. And the sponsor, who she had done email, and that was about it. So she's sitting there and she's the sponsor and she's watching me do my thing. And I made a little magic 8-ball. Everyone knows what the magic 8-ball is, right? I made a magic 8-ball game for the girls' tablets, and they could shake it and go, will I, have spaghetti for dinner tonight? Looking doubtful kind of thing. And we made this magic 8-ball. The woman that sponsored these 7th graders said to me afterwards, she goes, I'm going straight home. I'm going to go do this. And she did. She made the magic 8-ball. She said, I couldn't quite get it to shake, but I could get it to answer, you know. So if we all take on this curiosity and we say, hey, look what I did in an hour of my time. It's kind of like the Mud City thing. I mean, it's just this little, you know, kind of puzzly, twisty thing. If you like Sudoku, or if you like crossword puzzles, or even those logic games, you know, there's a fork in the road, and one road leads to the path of life, and then one road leads, you know, those old riddles we all used to play, at least our family did. You know, getting ourselves interested, just as a society, and then maybe it'll leak. So that's a hard question, is how to get these people involved, these young girls and young boys involved.
Because sitting in front of the computer and
I'm sorry?
playing games, sitting in front of the computer and playing games is not it.
It is if they want to get inside of them and modify them. That's what I would say. If you want to play this game, great. But what, you know, there are certain games that segue into programming. Minecraft and all sorts of games actually require some programming skill to do. So there are computer games where, you know, you immerse yourself in a first-person shooter game, which doesn't lend itself maybe to this algorithmic processing. But there are definitely games that you can play that do and require a little more intuitive, you know, thinking. And if they want to get inside the game, I know plenty of kids that have started off gaming and said, I was so curious, I wanted to do my own thing. And they opened up the game and programmed it and figured out how to change it themselves. And that might be a good way to get to them. But yes, to be addicted to computer games, that's a different beast altogether. Yeah. Oh.
At the high school where you're teaching, what do you call them?
Yeah, there's two of us. That's okay. He's got the mic. I'll defer to the microphone. Sorry, Dot. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Dot. So I was in school in the late 80s, getting my master's degree at Santa Clara. And at that time, there were probably almost 50% women in the computer science. And that didn't surprise me at the time. And since that time in my career, I've worked with many, many women in engineering, in computer science, also in physics, and certainly genetically they seem to be superior to men in my observation. And I think our nation needs to have all the good people, not just half of them. So it's been something of dismay. I've observed that they've dropped off so much. And I worry that part of it is the fact that women have come into the industry and found kind of a hostile environment and have left. I know where I work, they don't have a hostile environment. At least I don't think so. I hope not. But I do know that that's not true in many places. And I think that has to change before we ever will make big strides.
Right. No, I completely agree that it's a multifaceted problem, and once they get into the working world, they need to be welcomed as they have been, hopefully, in getting there.
They also need to be given the opportunity to climb. They have to be allowed to be the managers and the CEOs. And yes, there are a few now, but not very many. And I think that there's still there's still sort of a glass ceiling.
Right. Right. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. He's
Had a
next.
microphone.
Are you aware of any grassroots or core efforts, maybe at a university level, that are really promoting at an elementary school age around computer science or software programming? And do you know, do you have any examples of that?
I have a variety of examples. There's a on Grace Hopper Day, and during that whole week, there's a program called the Hour of Code, where I think it's its third year. Last October was its third or maybe fourth year, and it was started by a young engineer who saw this problem and started to just create a blog about it, and he was at the White House with us, actually, and I didn't meet the president, it wasn't that big of a deal, but he did. He actually shook the president's hand, and the president sat down and programmed JavaScript that day. It's our first programming president, by the way. So a movement like this, yes, it started as a simple website, a simple blog, a complaint that we don't have enough programmers and that everyone should just try an hour of code. And it happens during Grace Hopper Week. She now has a whole week, I guess. And the kids will sit and go to, with their classmates, they'll go and do this hour of code thing and learn how to program Angry Birds for their Android phones, or for the classroom's tablets, or for the classroom computer. There's that kind of grassroots movement that's kind of free and self-directed. And then Project Lead the Way is one of the country's preeminent engineering curriculums. They are creating a launch curriculum for all elementary schools, and they're rolling it out across the country, and they're leveraging it out and trying to get it into elementary schools. So it's everything from this little grassroots startup in the classroom to big corporate, you know, Chevron and Lockheed and Autodesk, and I can't remember who all contributes to Project Lead the Way. So it's happening at different levels, but to try to get the elementary schools up and running.
Yeah, the reason I asked that is my experience through industry is probably at supercomputing. It's called SC, and it's Lawrence, Livermore, Berkeley, Oak Ridge.
Right.
All of them go, Stanford, the Linear Accelerator Group. And then all the universities that have an HPC, a high performance computing section, which they all do, which typically connects with the computer science. But my most familiar one that struck a chord with you was Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge has a girls' software camp. And when I talked to the person there, they said the parents kind of thought, oh great, daycare, let's throw them in that. And the girls have gotten so enthused about it that it's become one of those things. So I don't know if universities collaborate together or between the Livermore labs. Anybody that deals with high performance computing deals with computer science. You're starting to see people like San Diego State, Louisiana State, that are looking beyond that, saying this is where we need our next.
Right, and many universities are. My alma mater does. A friend of mine, a colleague of mine, Cal Poly helps him promote his Femineers. Love that word. A bunch of female engineers at his high school, and you know they help fund trips around to present their engineering solutions. So it's in fits and starts. You know, it's starting, and hopefully the people that I know in computer science education feel like the tide has finally turned, that it has been ebbing and tiding for way too long, for 30 years. And finally, corporate America, school districts, parents, and students are all getting behind this and saying, yes, we can teach our country to be computer scientists. So.
Well, we all appreciate the wonderful job you've done at Granada High School, going from one class to 12 and getting so many more students into computer-focused classes. What is being done, if anything, at the other high schools at Livermore High and in Pleasanton and Dublin, and maybe even in the junior highs to, do you teachers all get together and help each other, or?
We do. There's an association called the Computer Science Teachers Association, and we meet, there's two, one in Berkeley and one in Silicon Valley, and we meet and discuss this. The problem is, at this point, I see it, is the teacher. Right now, the program is strong at Granada because they have a computer science teacher. If you don't have the luck to have a computer science teacher at your school, or someone willing to step forward and become a computer science teacher, you're not going to have a computer science program. I think the word we need to get out more is that if you are not afraid of technology, if it doesn't make you miserable throughout the day, and believe me, it's made me miserable, my students can attest to that, but in general, if you can tinker, if you can, as a teacher, I'm saying, as a teacher, and you have this comfort level with technology, and maybe a little bit of a mathematical mind, maybe a little bit of creativity in terms of, you know, solving little puzzles and things, try to be a computer science teacher. You don't have to have a 4-year degree. You don't need to do it what I did. I went out and worked forever. You do not need to do that to teach high school and junior high computer science. To teach an introductory course, all you need to be is a collaborator. I think we need to move away, and here's my soapbox again, from the sage on stage. And right now, this is the worst example. I'm up here talking to you like a sage on stage. We need to move away from that paradigm and sit down with the kids and say, you know what, I don't know this, but let's find out together. Let's explore together. I have the life experience. I have maybe more patience. I have maybe more resources to guide you, but we're going to explore this together and we're going to learn together and become computer scientists together. And I think that's a worthwhile experience for a student and a teacher to have, and it'll help overcome this dirge of computer science teachers that we just don't have. So to get to other high schools, that's the long way around your question, we need to get more teachers willing to teach the subject matter, and that's a very scary thing. It's going to take, well, I shouldn't say that, but I was going to say it's going to take money, because to train a teacher properly, they need time to learn this. And a teacher's day is already so chock full of work that to say, oh, by the way, this Saturday for 4 hours for the next 12 weeks, you're going to be working, and you're not going to get paid because we need you to teach this subject matter. Not a lot of people are going to do that. Take an hour out of their day paid, send them, provide them with good training, then yes, but that's a tremendous amount of money on a national scale. To give every teacher an hour a day or a couple hours a week to train in this, it's a complex, costly endeavor. We just have to get some motivated teachers to be computer science teachers, and that's a hard
Are you
thing.
teaching all 12 classes?
I do.
How do you do that?
I spend a lot of time at school. And many of my Saturday mornings are spent getting ready for the next week. I love it. I loved computer science, and at 17 I discovered it and never looked back. And I've done it my whole life. It's one of those things that just tickles my brain. And my family can tell you, I'll sit there and I'll laugh. And I'll, woohoo, I got it working. Very, very unusual. So, because other people garden. I geek out, right. So.
I just got the high sign. We're coming to the end of our hour. Perhaps
Okay.
we can take one more question and others can speak with you after.
Sure, and I'll be happy, if anyone wants to see the Mud City solution, I will share it, and other questions afterwards too.
Hi, you probably already noticed that I was surprised to discover Khan Academy has the computer programming.
Can you,
course.
I'm actually
Oh.
parked up, so can you?
Oh, the Khan
only hear
Academy
one ear.
has the computer science or computer programming course, and it's so much better than the one that I remember doing in school. And it's narrated, the little videos are narrated by young women, and I was surprised how I liked that. And you just create art pieces and color, and then you can animate your drawings. And one of the assignments was to make a plate of food, and then you can share it with other people around the world. But I think we like, instead of being isolated online, or we like to do it in a group.
Right.
So it's kind of cool too.
The new
Do it as
parent.
a club after school or a club at
Mhm.
lunch or something like that.
And it doesn't even have to be after school. There's been a shift again in the way it's taught, and I didn't mention it. I'm glad you brought it up. The paired programming paradigm, and I actually got that out without spitting, is to have two students sit together and work together and not have both of them typing. What they do, and they just don't sit there and one person watches while the other person types. If you are the typist, then the person next to you is telling you what to do, or you are telling them what you're typing, so there's a constant communication. They do this in industry now, and they find that work gets done faster by two programmers than working two programmers individually. The code is less buggy and of higher quality. So this paired programming, this collaborative effort is new within the last 7 or 8 years, and it's starting to help people who don't want to sit heads down by themselves, you know, eating Twinkies and drinking Coca-Cola and locked in a dark room forever. They don't want to program that way. They're finding that this collaborative approach is much, much better. So, and it produces better code too, so that's great. Well, thank you for your interest. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.